Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. It's the third meeting of the Rapid Transit Implementation Working Group for 2018. I will call the meeting to order. Do we have any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. So we'll move right into our scheduled items. We have a delegation with Ms. Jenny Ramsey, our project director. Go ahead.
All right, thank you through the chair, and I'm glad to be back tonight. What we thought we would do for this evening's presentation is walk you through some of the boards that we've been using at our open house sessions that we had over the course of the last week. So I'm not going to do a bunch of preamble. I think they're going to basically speak for themselves. As usual, we've been promoting people to tune in and watch tonight using YouTube so they can watch live. So some things I might be spending a little bit of time on that I know we've covered before, but it's there for the benefit of those that are maybe tuning in for the first time. And yeah, we'll just walk through those presentations today. So I'm going to start off, here we have the poster for our open house, just to kind of comment on that. I'm going to touch on some of the purpose of those open houses and sort of the turnout that we had, but starting into, oops, I'm on the wrong side. Okay, so just touching on the purpose of those open houses. So again, we had gone out in December and January with 9 sessions to talk about the different options for the corridors, taking that feedback as well as our different criteria. We wanted to loop back with the public and give them a chance to see our recommended design before we bring that forward to council in April. So that was the main purpose. We also had some new information in terms of sharing for the first time our early design concepts for BRT stops. In terms of turnout, we had excellent turnout for those. Again, we're really excited to see people being very engaged in the project. Over the 5 sessions, we had 496 people out. At least that's who signed in. I think we even had a few people that were just floating on by, especially at our library session. So we had very good turnout. We're compiling the comment sheets that we got from these open houses, and we'll be including them as part of our presentation that we're bringing forward to council in April as part of the draft DPR. And I think as far as how those sessions go, I'd say that the tone, again, was very respectful, and the questions and comments that we got was very constructive. So we're really happy with how those sessions went. We've included a timeline. This was a board that we've added to our collection for the last open house, really to give people sort of a timeline on where we've been and where we're headed. There's still a lot of work to do on the EA into detailed design, and then before we even get to the construction phase. So I think a lot of people are always asking us, well, when are you going to start construction and where are we now? So we wanted to put something together that was easy to digest and be able to understand where we sit today. So I'm not going to go through it in detail, but all of these boards are available on the SHIFT website if people want to dive a little deeper and look into some of the details. We touched on some of those core key messaging around our project and some of those citywide benefits, like a 35% increase in transit service, reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, some of our reduced or deferred road widenings that can be pushed off because of doing this project, how many people will be able to walk to work or to their home from a BRT route or stop, and the fact that we're revitalizing 24 kilometers of our city roads with this project. We spent a lot of time, we always go back to the basics when we have our sessions, and what is bus rapid transit, the idea of dedicated lanes and how that's what brings the reliability and the frequency of this service, how we're able to make better connections with local service, integrating our local service with rapid transit to improve service citywide, and then also the fact that as part of our project, we're implementing smart traffic signals, which will help to be able to reduce congestion and smooth traffic flow across the city, whether you're on an RT corridor or not. We also like to touch on some of those other core features about bus rapid transit. Modern design features, the fact that our buses and our BRT stops will be accessible, we'll have real-time information, attractive shelters, making a point to have good pedestrian and cycling connections to be able to have your first and last mile be different, whatever your situation is. And again, integrating those designs into the neighboring communities. We talked about our 2 corridors, where they go, the 2 routes, the northeast route having a 5-minute separation between buses and the southwest having a 10-minute headway on buses. We touched on local service integration. Again, that ability to be able to reinvest service that's currently on those RT corridors and reinvest it into other areas of the city allows us to bring more buses to more places more often. So we're improving service to areas that are maybe underserved or not served in the periphery of the city by being able to redistribute that resource. We also talked about stop spacing and the fact that, with BRT, we're running essentially an express type service where we have larger spacing of BRT stops. And on average, it would take you about 5 or 7 minutes to walk to a BRT stop if you're standing as far as you could at the midpoint between two spots. We talked about our BRT bus specifications, and so the fact that, again, we're currently going through a study with QTRIC, which is a group that looks at bus technology to review what our technology will be, whether it'll be high-efficiency diesel or electric. But the idea is that our buses will be modern, high-capacity, fully accessible with comfortable seating. Again, they're running in primarily dedicated lanes, and that there'll be a bus running in a dedicated lane at a 5-minute headway has the capacity to be able to carry almost about 1,300 people per hour in one direction. So again, kind of touching back on some of the consultation that we did in December and January. Again, those sessions, we had 9 in total, and were to allow the public to provide their comments on the different design options on how we would configure those routes along our BRT corridors. In that case, we had almost 800 attendants out at those sessions. We had 267 written comments, a lot of discussions as well around the boards, which was great to hear those feedbacks. We continue to get comments via email, and again, we had a different session where we had surveys where people could comment on the stop features they'd like to see at BRT stops. So lots of ways that people could feed into this process. We spent some time, and I wanted to kind of again touch on that today, on how we arrived at our recommended design options. And the truth is that each of those design options that we've recommended are rooted in those basic core principles that we set out through the Rapid Transit Master Plan. And those are city building, community revitalization, transportation capacity and mobility, and operational viability, as well as fiscal responsibility and affordability. So those were our overarching principles. In addition to that, we had over 25 different technical criteria in environmental, cultural heritage, those sorts of issues that we had to balance in terms of determining our preferred options. And then, of course, public and stakeholder input is also critical in how we got to the recommended designs that we're presenting today. At our previous session, we've identified 9 key focus areas where we were looking at different options or alternatives to how to configure the BRT routes. Those are listed on the screen. So again, we're looping back on each of those areas at our current open houses that we did last week to say what was the recommended design in each area. And again, we also provided some early concepts for our BRT stop designs. So that's sort of the end of the preamble bit. I kind of went through it a little bit quickly because I know that we have a lot to cover in terms of the actual recommended design options and going through those. But again, the information is all available on our website if people want to go back and look at it in more detail. So next, I thought I would walk us through some of the information we presented about rapid transit stop design. So again, this board gives an example of some of the many features that we've considered and will be part of our designs going forward. We had a public workshop on stops and streetscapes back in mid-November. Again, we asked the public for what are the features that are important to them when they're looking forward to these stops, and how should we work to try to fit those into the surrounding neighborhoods. So things that we heard from the public in terms of priorities, real-time bus information, fully and partially enclosed areas within those bus shelters. Again, benches, those comfort sort of features that are important to people is what we saw sort of float to the surface and sort of in terms of key features they were looking for. We also heard a desire to make sure that the stops that we design are sustainable, they're safe, accessible, and people were really stressing the importance of having design excellence in those and how they fit and integrate into the neighborhoods. We also wanted to talk about how these designs will evolve over time. So we have some early concepts, and again, we were trying to determine what are our needs from an EA perspective. So what are the widths of the sheltered platforms? Where would we put passenger information? Maybe ticket vending, offboarding and onboarding areas, those enclosed areas that we talked about, and making sure that, again, they were fully accessible. We've got In the diagram, you can, oh, here we go, there's my mouse. You can see some places where we've shown diagrams to be able to indicate the ability to turn around even the largest size of mobility devices. And we all know that wheelchair, strollers seem to keep getting bigger every year. So we want to make sure we can accommodate that. And again, these designs will evolve. So, as we move forward, the intent is that BRT stops will be recognizable as a BRT stop across the city, but we can still customize those in ways to be able to fit them into the neighborhood. Things like materials, colors, finishes on the platform surface or the walls. I'm looking for opportunities to maybe integrate art or information that reflects the cultural heritage or history of a given neighborhood. But essentially that canopy length and the size and those key features will remain the same and consistent. I think going forward, we want to be able to engage Londoners and make that a fun process on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis to be able to engage people in what these stops will look like. And one thing I noted at each of the presentations last week is that I promise we are not going to build 38 beige stops. This is really that blank canvas for what the stops will look like when we move forward. So with this, I thought I would start moving into the corridors. I'm going to take us through our recommended designs, sort of corridor by corridor. We'll start with north and then move our way around the RT routes. So with each of those 9 key areas, I'm going to walk through some of what our recommended design is, what we heard from the public at our different sessions, and then some of the reasons why we've recommended the design that we have. So for Richmond Street North, from Oxford to University Drive, we're recommending 2 center running BRT lanes with 2 lanes of general traffic, one northbound and one southbound. Things we heard from the public was a desire to minimize the impacts to trees, driveways, and properties. We sort of had mixed opinions on curbside versus center running, depending on perspective. I think in most cases, when we took time to talk to people about center running and how it works and help them understand how you get to the platform, how that system would operate, I think a lot of people really sought to see the benefits of a center running system. We also heard concerns from the public about how traffic would be impacted by this proposed design. Again, that's something that we looked at. So we recommended this design. It provides the most reliable BRT service. Again, center running is always going to give you that most reliability because those lanes are protected from any vehicular traffic crossing through them except at signalized intersections. So again, you maintain that true dedicated lane that allows for that reliability and ability to provide increased frequency. This design option has less property impacts in terms of there's fewer impacts to trees, less individual properties are being impacted. We've noted, and we've heard from other municipalities as well, that a center running system is a safer system due to the ability to provide protected left turn lanes at those signalized intersections. This design was the lower cost of the different ones. And then we also did some modeling, which I'll dive into a little bit deeper, but we showed that through parallel improvements on Adelaide, on Western Warncliffe, and through the campus, that we'll be able to accommodate the traffic that will be on Richmond with those improvements, as well as providing other turning facilities and bus bays along Richmond. One other point is that center running is the most efficient option for winter maintenance and waste removal. So those all factors played into our decision to go with this recommended design. This is the cross section that we're showing. So kind of in a concept, you can see that we have our center running BRT lanes down the center of the road. They're separated by 1.5 meter wide concrete median, which is about curb height. It's not a tall barrier that maybe some people have thought was the case. It's just a curb height median that you'd see in any road that's separated. We lost our graphics here. Can you guys see on your computers? No. There we go. All right, we're back in action. So we've got our 2 center running lanes, median separated, and then you can see the 2 lanes of general traffic, one northbound, one southbound, boulevard area, sidewalks, and then some additional space for trees where we're trying to, again, as we get into detailed design, we'll be working in this area to mitigate impacts where we can and try to keep our tree impacts down as well. I mentioned I'd dive a little bit deeper into some of the traffic modeling that we did. And so what we wanted to demonstrate was how traffic would respond to the changes that we're going to be implementing and recommending through our system. And in order to do that, we needed to look at the entire traffic area from the north. So we modeled using a computer simulation the area from up near Masonville right down to south of Oxford Street. And the goal there was to be able to capture all of the parallel improvements that are happening in the area. So some examples of those are removing the bottleneck on Western Road where the rail crossing bridge, that work is underway right now. We're also planning on Adelaide Street to advance a grade separation or an underpass of that rail system, which will again remove a bottleneck from that area and make Adelaide a more amenable option for people that are maybe coming from the northeast down towards the corridor. And then another parallel change in traffic patterns going forward is that with Western's master plan for their campus and open space plan, they are planning on going with a car-free scenario on campus. And also when we bring BRT through the campus and over University Drive, there will no longer be vehicular traffic cutting through the campus from that area. So that again is going to affect the volume of vehicles traveling on Richmond. We then combine that with the fact that as part of our design, we'll be incorporating right turn lanes and left turn lanes at all signalized intersections and side streets. And in locations where local service feeder routes are feeding people into the BRT corridors and are on Richmond Road, they'll be stopping in bus bays so that they're not bogging down the through lane of traffic that's provided. So essentially we were providing one lane of general traffic in each direction, but that lane will be unencumbered by the many things that bog down Richmond North today. Okay, so I'm going to flip over to a two-screen scenario. And so again, I wanted to just quickly bring up one of the renderings we have. This is a rendering for Richmond Street at Grosvenor, looking north. Again, you can see the center running here. We've got center running dedicated lanes. The platforms are center running as well. So in order to access those stops, you would cross at the pedestrian crossing at the signalized intersection, just like you would today to go, but instead you'll be stopping at the midpoint and be waiting inside a protected shelter area for the next BRT bus to come along. Okay, I'm gonna move forward to, let's head south down Richmond Street and now talk about the portion of Richmond from Central to Oxford, or Central Ave to Oxford Street West, which would basically be that Richmond Row area. In this area, we're again recommending 2 center running BRT lanes with 2 general lanes of traffic. We heard from the public concerns about pedestrian and cycling safety. Again, traffic capacity reductions. On-street parking and loading areas was important for the businesses along this stretch of Richmond. We need to address business impacts during construction, again, which is something that as we move forward with our project, we'll be having strategies and communications plans for how to manage construction when we work through these busy commercial areas. We had questions about the distance between RT stops, and we also had questions about how we'll be managing the crossing at the rail at the CP rail crossing there and how we'll deal with potential conflicts with trains. So in terms of the reasons we recommended this option, again, it offers the most reliable BRT service. So again, we are separating BRT from those curbside activities that are common in this type of Main Street area. We've also looked at potential to accommodate some on-street parking and loading areas in the form of bays. So with the center running option, we were able to maintain on-street parking in areas of Richmond along the Richmond Row, as well as some loading bays. With the curbside scenario, those would have been gone with having the buses running along the curb lane. So we were able to maintain that. We're also looking for areas along connecting side streets to look for opportunity to identify loading areas there. So again, there's the ability to still manage some of those quick deliveries and quick drop-offs and pickups. We were also considering the fact that we wanted to maintain a consistent configuration for BRT from the north side of Oxford Street down to the south side of Oxford Street. And again, property constraints south of Oxford were a major factor. We've also noted that traffic can be accommodated on parallel corridors. We have a grid system to the south, which again allows other ways for people to be able to access businesses along that section of the route. And again, it's the most efficient option for winter maintenance, waste removal. Center running is a safe option as well. So here's a cross-section for the Richmond Row section. Again, we've got center running separated by that curb height, or that curb height 1.5 meter median. And just to stress again, the reason why that median is important to center running BRT is the fact that if we didn't have that there, inevitably people trying to make left turn movements would use those BRT lanes as a shelter or refuge to wait for an opportunity. We'd have cars stopped in those lanes, we get buses stopped, and all of a sudden our system isn't rapid anymore. So we need to maintain the integrity of those BRT lanes, and that's why we have those center running median down the center, but then we offer left turn opportunities at the signalized intersections. So I'm going to flip over to the other side. Here we go, and I believe, do I have another rendering? Nope, that's the Wellington South. Okay, we'll go back over here. Okay, so that was a summary of the Richmond North. I'm not sure, did we want to take questions kind of corridor by corridor as we go and maybe take a breather and see if there's some things I can answer?
I think that's the best way to do it. It's such a big presentation. So I'll start to the left for questions. Councillor Squire, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just want to do this publicly. I had requested through Ms. Scheer information for this meeting with relation to how the traffic numbers and diversion numbers were arrived at, so I could ask questions about that. I just want to make it public that I have not been provided with that information to date. So I'm concerned about that. So I have a ward meeting coming up on March 19th, which isn't, you don't have to worry about that. I'm doing my own technical stuff at that meeting because of decisions that would be made. So I just want a public undertaking. When am I going to get that information so I will be able to provide my constituents with meaningful information as to how these numbers arrived at? And the reason it's important is twofold. I'm on my own that night, one, and two, this is one of the largest questions that my constituents ask about. And three, I was at your meeting, the Ward 6 meeting that took place at Lambton Hall, and there was no traffic modeling there that I saw. In other words, the technical traffic modeling was there. So since that meeting, constituents have been in touch with me and said, how did they calculate these numbers and how did they arrive at these conclusions? So this is an issue that's of the utmost importance to me, and I'd like an undertaking as to when I'm going to get that information.
Through the chair, we've asked our consultants to provide a technical memo that provides more information than what was on the boards at our public open houses. We received that this morning, and I'm just having a quick look at it, and I should be able to provide it by tomorrow.
And just to follow up, Madam Chair, through you, I want to make sure that that is going to have the information that I need so I can intelligently address my constituents on March 19th as to how, and in a fair way, as to how staff and our consultants made these decisions that this model would work with minimal traffic disruption in Ward 6.
The technical memo that we've prepared is going to walk through the assumptions. It's going to show the various scenarios that were modeled, not just the one that was presented on the board, which is to represent the recommended design, and how we got to those assumptions. So that's there as part of our draft EPR that we'll be bringing forward on April 9th to committee. That will actually have the full detailed modeling, but we're still working on that document. So this was our ability to pull together a technical briefing that outlined those assumptions and how we got to those recommendations.
Second question, I was also at the Ward 6 meeting, open house, and the route through Western University was set out in a fairly bare bones manner, meaning it showed a route, but it didn't show anything in terms of stops or detailed design or anything of that nature. But I did discover at that meeting for the first time that University Drive Bridge, it says closure of University Drive Bridge, which again is of real importance to constituents in my area because many of them use that bridge on a day-to-day basis to move from one area of the ward to the other. And so they have been coming to me since, and they're very curious about what the design is for University Drive 1 and what the cost is for going through Western University. And in that regard, is there going to be some kind of information provided to me as a councillor who represents Ward 6 to say, here's what it's going to look like on the university campus, here's how it's going to work, and here's what it's going to cost?
At our open houses, we did have a CAD board, a large board that showed the full plans through the Western Campus in detail. It showed where the location of the 3 stops were at either end of that and the route through the campus. As far as the closure of traffic onto the University Drive Bridge, that is something that is being driven by the university's campus master plan. It's separate from the work that we're doing, but as part of our RT route, we'll be moving over that University Drive Bridge, providing for 2 lanes of dedicated bus lanes, as well as pedestrian and cycling lanes across that bridge is what the ultimate design would be under this scenario.
Is there an estimated cost, or is that a cost that Western has?
So we're working through the detailed designs for that with Western, and we've got a concept for that bridges, and we'll be including a full breakdown of an updated cost for the project based on our recommended designs with our draft DPR presentation in April.
Any further questions? One more.
It's okay through you, Madam Chair. So, before my ward meeting on March 19th, or at least before the meeting of the SPPC on April 9th, will there be a design of the route through Western that will show me exactly what it's going to look like in detail? You say you're still working on the bridge, and the actual projected cost for taking the BRT route through Western University.
We can provide the design through campus. Today, we have that information that was available at the open houses. And then as part of our report that we're bringing forward in April, we'll be providing a full update on the cost for the entire project. So that'll be part of our report that we're bringing forward to SPPC on April 9th.
Last one. It's fine. We'll come back to you.
That wasn't really the question I asked. I didn't ask the question coming back with the cost of the total project. My constituents want to know what is the cost of taking BRT through Western University campus. I get asked, and I know sometimes people think I'm asked, it's just me. My constituents ask me these questions all the time. What's the cost of going through Western, Phil? So I'm hopeful that at some point I can answer their question.
And through our report, we'll make note of that and try to break down some of those key sections so that people can understand what the costs are along the route, not just as a whole.
Are these questions that you've submitted in writing so they have a path going? Could you submit them in writing so that it's crystal clear what you're looking for? Just to make it easier?
But I'm not.
Thank you.
That's what I do as a counselor.
Thank you. Any further questions to my left? No? Any questions to my right? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much. Couple questions about the choice to go with 2 lanes of 2 dedicated lanes and 2 lanes of regular traffic at on Richmond Street north of Oxford. So the maybe the first and easiest one. What happens when a car breaks down on that single lane of traffic?
Through the chair, the road will really be like a 2-lane road in either direction, in the sense that there's no physical barriers that stop people from being able to move across from the through-lane traffic to the BRT traffic. So obviously, if there was an accident or some sort of unforeseen situation, we would likely have police on hand to be able to direct traffic, and we'd be able to move them around that bus using the dedicated lane. That would be a non-typical operating system, and we'd respond to that.
Okay, that's good. We talked about the parallel improvements and how people are going to be traveling from the Transit Village along Western Road and along Adelaide instead of Richmond Street. But that's moving many thousands of cars 20 to 50% farther than they otherwise would. So that's going to have a pretty big impact on the greenhouse gases. Do you have an idea of how much more that will be because of the diverted traffic?
I don't have a number for that, but I do, can comment on the fact that really we're providing more options for people to be able to move north-south from the north end of town to the downtown core. And I don't know that we're necessarily extending the length that they're traveling, we're just giving more options, whereas right now, many of those drivers are choosing to funnel down Richmond as the straightest route and the route that doesn't have some of those bottlenecks that we see on Western and Adelaide.
Okay, thank you. I might look into that, because there's a claim that we're reducing greenhouse gases, and I don't know, that may not be the case if we're diverting the majority of actual vehicles so that they have to travel farther. That might work against us in that area. So, and the final thing about that decision, I know when Rapid Transit was first sold to me, the idea was that we're, of course, in the future, going to have to expand these roads anyway, because there'll be more traffic and more people traveling on them. But this is a way to do it sooner with the help of federal and provincial funding. And then what that will give us is these dedicated lanes to put buses in, and then hopefully we'll be able to divert a bunch of that future traffic onto those bus routes because they're more attractive. However, in this case, we're not expanding these roads, and that was a bit of a concern. And also, the logic behind it. I read in the paper that rapid transit is largely for development purposes, so we're expecting redevelopment along these routes, but we're not expanding it because we're trying to reduce the impacts to the properties and the trees. But if redevelopment happens, those trees and those properties are going to be impacted anyway. So why would we not then expand it? So we would be kind of going all the way with rapid transit rather than maybe going halfway in that.
Through the chair, I would say that rapid transit is about balance, and so we need to balance our ability to move more people more efficiently, and that's what the dedicated lanes can offer. But we also need to balance that with property impacts and how our city will grow. BRT is part of a larger plan. You know, we're not putting all of our eggs in the BRT basket. We have other work that's part of our overall transportation master plan so that our entire city can move around better, and BRT is a piece of that. So it's balancing congestion going forward by being able to move those people more efficiently. And development is definitely an excellent side effect of having a BRT system. We want to see that sort of growth along the corridors, but it won't look the same along each of those corridors. We want to try to have mixes of uses to be able to bring people close to those corridors, to be able to balance how we grow as a city, to not only grow outward, but also grow inwards and upwards. And again, that all is, again, that big balance that is trying to find the right way to fit BRT into our city.
Okay, thank you. So when we do get that development, and of course these routes are attractive, I was contacted by a real estate agent today asking for some specifics about where the routes were going because there's people interested in purchasing property along them. And and I'm sure that some of those will be interested in developing. So that part of the plan seems to be working already. However, maybe my question then is if properties are purchased and redeveloped along that, or maybe other routes where we haven't expanded the roads, will we then be taking that extra lane for a future expansion, which often happens, right? So when properties are rezoned and redeveloped, we often look at that point to say, well, we have a future expansion planned, and so we'll take a portion of that property so that into our road allowance for that future expansion. Will that be happening along this route?
With any development, when they come in for an application for site plan, we look at whether there are any road widening needs. And we first look to our official plan to say what are our road widening requirements we can take under that. And then secondly, we look to any approved EAs to note if there's any additional lands that we need. This EA is going to be our basis going forward for land taking or land dedications for widening when we go through development application processes. And so we'll be following this. So again, once we have a completed EA, as development proposals come through the system that are on routes that we haven't gotten to yet, we'll be able to use that development approval process to be able to get the road widenings to implement this project. So this is our plan for going forward.
All right, so again, are we entertaining a possible future expansion to the 6 lanes along this route?
I think at this point, the EA that we're recommending is for a bus rapid transit system along Richmond that has the lane configuration that we've presented.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Commissioner Shepherd.
I do note that in conversations I've had with people are surprised to hear that the university is planning on closing University Bridge. So I think that's not well known by the public. But correct me if I'm wrong, I think that when Mr. White was here in one of our very first meetings in this room, that was one of the pieces of information he shared with us at that time.
I believe that the plan to have portions of campus go car-free has been part of their master plan for some time, and they've communicated that through their own public sessions.
Any further questions to my right? No? One last. Oh, Councillor Elmer.
Thank you. So for the north turnaround, I know the recommendation is to essentially just expand the existing terminal. Can you just talk me through how we would respond to any kind of redevelopment that would happen at the mall property in particular, which obviously would affect the terminal, and what the other options might be if that starts to redevelop more along the lines of a transit village than a mall with a lot of surface parking?
As far as the design that we've recommended for the north turnaround, we've proposed an interim preferred design that allows us to be able to expand the existing terminal. It provides for the most implementable solution as well as the best connectivity between the entire transit village. Any further away, and we're not really serving the other 3 quadrants of that village very well. And so it's there to be able to implement quite easily based on just an expansion of the existing, but we have also noted, and we'll note very clearly in our EA, the desire to work with any future intensification on that site to see if we can look at options to have an integrated stop into some form of transit-oriented development at that node. And so I think that's something that would be very much in line with what we are proposing through the London Plan and what we're trying to inspire at that transit village. So we've provided an option that we know we can implement and that will provide the service and the great connectivity we need for local service to RT, but left it open to be able to work with development of that site.
Thank you. And the current property owners there, what are their feelings on the expanded transit terminal? Do they sort of agree with that as an interim step?
Again, they're very early in any sort of discussion processes about what they might do with the planning permissions that come with the London Plan for transit villages, but we have had early discussions with them about trying to encourage development and being able to work together going forward. At this point, we've tried to, with our design, offset some of the loss of parking that would come with the expansion so that in the short term that there is a bit of a net balance on that.
Any further questions on the North Corridor? No? Okay, let's move to the South Corridor.
Okay, so continuing from the south, this time we're going to start at the south end and Baseline to Bradley. Yeah, we're going to start at the south end, work north, and then loop back and pick up the turnaround at the south end. So the first section I'm going to walk us through is Wellington Road from Baseline to Bradley Ave. In this area, we had looked at 2 options, basically center running versus the curb running option. And we've recommended 2 center running BRT lanes with 4 general traffic lanes, 2 lanes in each direction. So again, this is an area where we're widening the road to maintain 2 lanes of existing traffic and to be able to continue to offer the current capacity that we have in that road today. questions that we had from the public. Again, especially down at the south and the busy Wellington Road stretch, people were asking questions about how left turns would work. Again, we sort of had differing opinions on center running versus curbside running, and we also had people pointing out that cycling facilities in this area would be appreciated to be able to connect people to the core by the Thames Valley Parkway. Why we recommended this again, center running is the most reliable option for BRT service. It creates a consistent vision for Wellington Road as a major gateway street coming into the downtown. It has fewer impacts from a property perspective, offers for safer, protected left turn movement. So again, today, in many cases, people are making left turn lanes across a multi-lane, very busy traffic road. And so what we'll be able to do with center running is allow for priority signals at each intersection where people making a left turn or a U-turn to kind of loop back and hit a mid-block access will be able to do that on a protected signal where only the left turn and U-turn movements have control of the intersection. So again, it's going to take people that are making mid-block left turns and bring them all to a safe and focused area. And again, we've seen in places like North York where they've said they've actually seen a reduction in accidents along center running BRT lanes because of how they've kind of brought the turning movement together into one safe location. Again, more efficient from winter maintenance, has increased transit reliability for center running, lower cost, and tree impacts for both center running and curb running were comparable in this scenario. So here's a cross-section of Wellington South. This cross-section is showing you a mid-block cross-section, so we don't see any turn lanes in this option. But you can see here we've again got the center median to break up between the two dedicated lanes running center running, 2 lanes of northbound and southbound traffic, boulevards, sidewalks. And in the case of this area, we've included a multi-use path on the east side of Wellington that continues from Bradley all the way up to Baseline Road. For those that can see the other side, I'm not sure if we want to switch over to the other screen. We have a rendering of the BRT stop at White Oaks Mall. So this is our most southerly BRT stop en route, and you can see that this is the end of the dedicated lanes. After that, the buses will continue in mixed traffic to the south to our turnaround options, which I'll go through in a minute. Oops. So next I'll walk us through the Wellington Curve, and this is the area of Wellington from south of the Thames River to Baseline Road. In this area, we looked at 3 options. So we were trying to balance the impacts of widening this road to be able to maintain 2 lanes of traffic in each direction. And in the end, we looked at widening to the east, widening to the west, and then straightening out or lengthening the curve, which is currently at below design radius. And so again, that's why you often see trucks hopping curves or people floating out of their lanes a little bit when they're coming around that corner a little too quickly. And so our design that we're recommending is to straighten or lengthen out that curve to get it closer to design radius for that and improve the safety. What that also does is it actually balances some of the property impacts a little bit on the east and a little bit on the west. What we heard from the public was we had requests to try to minimize impacts to St. Andrew's Memorial Church, questions about the city's process for addressing property impacts, because obviously we are impacting some properties quite significantly in this section of the corridor. We had some differing options on which way we should widen, whether to the east or to the west. And again, our recommended design in the end sort of balances that between the 2 sides. And again, people did comment on the fact that that curve is currently not to standard, and they noticed it. So why we recommended this design, again, we're making a more safer traffic because we're increasing those horizontal curves and also providing protected turn lanes as we are in other parts of the corridor with center running. This option had fewer impacts to trees. It also is sort of splitting the difference from a grading perspective. For those of you that may know that Wellington Curve well, there's the Anglican Church as well as the Lutheran Church that are kind of right in that corner. And so Redeemer Lutheran Church is already sitting on a bit of a retaining wall. If we were to widen more to the west on that side, we would have impacted that, driving that back and then really having to create quite a significant wall in order to be able to match grades in on that side. So again, we're balancing property impacts, grading impacts, tree impacts to try to almost thread the needle a bit through this section and try to find the best design we could. So here's another cross-section for Wellington Curve. Again, it's really the same cross-sections we saw to the south, but in this example, we're showing what a cross-section would look like through an intersection. So you can see some of the turn lanes are there. So again, we've got our two center running BRT separated by a median. We've got a left turn lane to one side, and so at a signalized intersection, this is where people would have the protected ability to make left turn and right turn movements. Is that me? I'll just pause a second till we get our screen back. There we go. So there's the left turn, and then what you see when you have these left turn intersections at a signalized intersection, you'll see almost a shadow area on the opposite side, and this is really the balance to the left turn that's coming from the opposite direction of traffic, and those are an area where we can look for opportunities to include landscaping in the corridor. We then have our 2 lanes of general traffic, northbound, southbound, and our sidewalks again. So here we have a rendering of Wellington Road at Commissioners. So again, you can sort of start to see northwards towards that rendering. Again, here is 2 platforms running at the center of the road. In this case, they're near side, which means they're on the same side of the intersection. You can see the multi-use path that's proposed along the east side of Wellington. And again, there's that center running median with options at signalized intersections to be able to make left turn movements. For the south turnaround, we've recommended combining the platforms for rapid transit and local service at the White Oak stop. So I had a rendering earlier up that showed the last BRT stop, which is an on-street BRT. I'll point to it in the map here. So we've got White Oaks Mall with the BRT stop located in the road out there. And so one of the things that we're doing in this location is consolidating the local service and the BRT to make transfers at that BRT stop. Because those buses, both local and RT, will be continuing southbound through mixed traffic to turn around and head back north, it makes sense to be able to bring them together at that center running stop. So people will be able to disembark from a local bus, wait for their RT bus to come on, and then continue going along their way in their, to be able to get to their destination. As far as turnaround options, we've actually shown 2 options in this area. We've shown an on-street option where buses continue in mixed traffic down to Holiday Drive and then use an existing signal that's located where the Old Navy Plaza has a signal there. And that allows buses to have a bus-only signal to turn them around and head them back to the north. We'd be looking at including a driver facility in that location. And so that's our sort of interim implementable and using existing road allowances to be able to do that. But we've also been working together with partners down near Exeter Road, next to the OPP dispatch down there, to look at options for a park and ride. So that is something that we're still considering. We're working together with MTO, Hydro One, as well as we own some land down in that section to look for options that will be able to bring that forward and see an area where if that were to come to fruition, we'd be able to turn the buses around in there and also have an area for people to be able to park and get onto the system.
If the chair would indulge me, just a question. I'm a little confused in was it 1.8 meters between the median between the 2 PRT lanes? Is that right? Or 1.5? And at the point at which there's a platform or a stop, I would assume that's wider than that. Would that not be true, or is it adequate with 1.5? It's not even 8 feet. Sorry to use the linear.
Through the chair to the councillor, where there's actually a stop, the stops are located on the outside of that. So the median is between the lanes and the stop is actually on the other side. In those stop locations, and I'll use this one as a great example, this graphic here, that white strip down the middle is that raised median. The stops are actually on the outside. In these stop locations, even though we've drawn them like this, that median actually may not be there in the stop locations that allow buses to go around each other if potentially they have to. So it's drawn in this location here as a median there. That's that 1.5, and that's really there for things like traffic poles, traffic signals, and those sort of things.
That's helpful. I obviously missed a piece there. And there's enough room. How wide are the platforms generally on either side?
The platforms are 3.5 meters wide, and so I brought up a different rendering on the screen that you should be able to see. And so you can see how the platforms are sitting 3.5 meters wide, which is why on the opposite you see that space taken up by a landscape strip to balance it out. But the RT dedicated lanes stay consistent and straight through there, as well as that 1.5 meter spacing constraint, and then the stops are to the outside.
And to my friends from the Fifth Estate, I tried to use my measuring tape on it, but it just didn't work. So, but that's helpful. Sorry, a little.
Well, I think that was it for the south leg. We sort of went to questions anyways. Are there any more questions for the south leg before we move on?
Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. So I think in one of the renderings, you're showing Commissioners of Wellington, and then out in the distance, I think I saw another one, another stop, Baseline in Wellington. And I just wanted to check that that is actually what is planned, split station across Baseline in Wellington, and then another station at Commissioners in Wellington. Like, this would be a very close together rapid transit station spacing, but it's because it's right at the hospital, right?
That's correct. Our average spacing for stops is about 700 meters apart, but there are areas where we do have stops that are closer together than that. This is one good example, and again, it is because we're hitting, I guess, either end of the hospital campus.
And have we had discussions with EMS about how these dedicated lanes are going to aid access into Victoria Hospital? Because you'll have them coming from the north and you'll have them coming from the south. There won't be cars pulling out of the way of ambulances. You'll just be able to go down the dedicated lanes.
And we've met with emergency services a couple times through the process, and again, they are they're aware and looking forward to be able to use these dedicated lanes as a way to be able to move quickly along these corridors to be able to get to the hospitals and to emergency situations. So, you know, again, with center running, you've got that added benefit that we inherently see signal lights behind us, siren lights, and we pull over to the outside. So they already have a lane that's pretty much clear with the exception of the odd bus, and now people have moved even further out of the way. So, and then in other situations, if you're congested and the through lanes of traffic are bogged down, they'll be able to move past them through these dedicated lanes. So it actually is, it improves their ability to reduce their travel time on key situations.
And just to return briefly to the north end, so there's these two stations and the dedicated lanes around Victoria Hospital. Then there's also at St. Joseph's Hospital, and then again there's going to be a station pretty close to University Hospital with another access potentially in, also all in dedicated lanes. Okay.
Any further questions on this side? None? Councillor Van Holst. Oh, sorry, you have to leave, don't you?
Yeah, if I may, I have to attend on the mayor's behalf another gathering. So just a comment about the turnaround close to Exeter Road. Given some of the anticipated development, particularly south of the 401, which stands to be a very major retail development, I assume that this, and probably in the time frame that we're actually building this, right? So we're looking at some major stuff south of the 401. Will there be the opportunity fairly easily, since the BRT is actually going to go close to Exeter Road, to extend it down to the turnabout so that the southern terminus is further south than White Oaks Road, and then LTC could reconfigure their local to actually serve south of 401.
I'll maybe pass it over to Kelly to get into more specifics about how we'll integrate local service to be able to get and serve areas beyond the limits of where we have dedicated lanes. But the goal is to be able to extend with mixed traffic down to a park and ride facility near the 401. In our discussions with MTO, we know that they're already working on their own plan to look for park and ride opportunities along the 401 corridor. And again, this is a great opportunity to do that. So looking forward, that's something that we can hopefully bring in and put in place.
And I can just add that we certainly are looking at opportunities to extend the local service. Obviously, with a new development that's going on there, we'll be looking for those opportunities. And whether it's the Holiday Drive turnaround or whether we ultimately end up at the carpool, we can still utilize those locations to do transfers, but then continue the local service out of there.
Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question through you, similar to the question that the Deputy Mayor asked, I suspect that a lot of people will want to go a little bit further to, say, IKEA. That would be a pretty popular destination to travel. What's the possibility of having the rapid transit go over? I guess it would have to be in mixed traffic across the interchange, but what about the possibility of getting there and turning around somewhere on the south side?
Again, I'll pass it over to Ms. Pelechny, but regardless going forward, whether we have BRT similar to today, we'll still do annual service reviews that will look at where ridership demand is and make adjustments. And so if there is a demand to extend BRT routes in mixed traffic to pick up further areas, that's something that would be looked at through that process.
Okay, thank you. And when the cars are making their U-turns, it will be similar to the dual left turn, will it? Or will it have to be one and the other?
It'll be a dual left turn, so it would be very similar to an advanced green that you would see today, except people would be able to make both left turn and U-turn movements. And again, all the other traffic within the intersection would stop, so they have control of the intersection. There's a great video we have on our website, actually, which we borrowed from York Region, that is an animation that shows exactly how a cycle of an intersection would work with a center running BRT. So we've had that at our sessions to help people visualize what that would look like.
Okay, thank you very much. It looks like some of the turnarounds will be a bit of a challenge. I doubt we're going to be able to put in a roundhouse, but that would be a fun addition as well. But thanks.
Commissioner Shepherd.
Thanks. I think the public might intuitively be expecting the turnaround to be at White Oaks Mall, as a lot of transfers happen there currently. So maybe you could just speak a little bit to why that's not the recommended path.
In terms of the turnaround, I mean, the idea of us moving the local service out onto this rapid transit corridor and extending the station size in front of White Oaks was to allow for easy transfers. Through discussions with White Oaks recently, their preference would be to have all local service off of their property. They're not looking to have more service on their property. This made sense from a transfer perspective. We know that this will be a key location for transfers to happen, given the amount of local service that serves this area. So moving everything out to where there was going to be a rapid transit station anyways and extended it made the most sense.
Thanks very much. That's perfectly sensible. The other comment I wanted to share is, as I really love the rendering that we just looked at moments ago with the landscape divisions between the BRT lanes and mixed traffic. And I understand that there are specific locations where those are going to be possible, and those are like the opposing dead end of a left-hand turn lane, and or as we can see currently in the approach up to a station. And I just want to emphasize how important I think those spots are, and I would ask staff to really scrounge for every bit of landscaping area that we can find within the confines of our design. I think it humanizes the entire experience of being on that road especially if you're in a car. You're on Wellington Road now. It's a massive freeway feel. It's just big and empty, and this changes it immensely. And of course, I like trees, so that's good. But the more the better. Thanks.
Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. I think part of the reason for our meetings is to just get more information out to the public. And Councillor Shepherd has asked about the transfers and how those are going to benefit people at White Oaks. Just wonder if there's some other strategies that are going to make transfers easier for people that we might want to hear now. How are those going to be simplified through in the rapid transit?
through you, Madam Chair, certainly at stations and part of the post-2019 service framework that we will be updating once all of this is finalized is looking at amending some of the local services that will be feeders to these routes to obviously connect where there are stations. So again, making the transfer simple. In the case of here at White Oaks and earlier when we talked about Masonville, again, extending that existing terminal that right now is used by local service, making it big enough to allow rapid transit and local to be there together. Obviously, that's going to improve the transfer options. So we will certainly be looking for every opportunity to make that happen. I think, Jenny, did you already cover the Capulet Lane, or are we gonna get to that one? So you'll see some others. Fanshawe is another one, which is the other end. We're looking at opportunities there as well, that station will be integrated between the local and the rapid transit service again, because we know a lot of transfers happen there. So certainly every opportunity we have, we're looking for that to happen.
Hey, I'm just gonna pause the meeting for a moment. We don't have quorum, so once we do, we'll resume. Okay, any further questions? Councillor Van Holst?
Thank you very much. Just a comment about this particular intersection. I had some discussions with residents today about the crosswalk buttons, and we might have to make a little change here regarding those. I do really like the center lane running when it comes to the ability for a resident to get across the street. If people are slow moving, the opportunity to take 2 cycles to get to a middle safe place and then continue is great, because that's a long distance to travel. But I understand with this intersection now, if you were at the gas station and you wanted to cross over to the property on the southeast, you would hit the button, but then by the time you got to the southwest corner, you'd have to wait another cycle in order to push the button. It doesn't always give you a pedestrian light to cross, and so I would assume that would be the case here. But I know people have said they tried to hack it. They would push the button at the gas station, and then just before they crossed, they would push the button to go across Wellington as well. And then when they got to the other side, it was only the pedestrian signal on the north side that was available to them. So I'm sure those will all be timed out, but it seemed to me that that's something we'll have to look at it as well. Thanks.
Councillor Helmer.
Yeah, just for the station that has both local transit and rapid transit near White Oaks, how long is the station itself?
We have 2 prototypes for stations. So for a typical station where we don't have those connection points, it would be 40 meters long, though it would extend to 60 meters long where we have areas where we're trying to make those connections. Another example would be at King at Wellington, the 2 stops there where our routes are coming together. We've got local service as well. So we have a longer model that we would use at those connection points.
And what is the sort of planned capacity of people standing at a 60-meter station? That's got to hold a lot of people, but I wonder, do we have a sense of how many people can stand on a platform like that?
I don't actually have that particular number. We could probably get that.
Any further questions for this corridor? Commissioner Southern.
Through the chair. So the last time we were here, they mentioned constantly that one of the key things you need to constantly do with BRT is make sure you're dedicated pretty much the whole time, right? dedicated lanes. And looking at I know it's a turnaround, so it's not really part of the service, but it will impact times, right? Or at least the number of buses we'll have to have running. Or are we putting like a delay there at the end so that we know the buses can kind of meander through the mixed traffic? And when somebody says, you know, what about extending it through mixed traffic? We're not really going to do that with the BRT generally for any kind of extension unless it's dedicated, right?
Through the chair, yes, so when we're working in mixed traffic for those small sections, it's at the end of the west leg, at the south of the south leg, and there's a small section on Warncliffe that is running in mixed traffic. And what we can do is use the priority signals that we have, that when a bus is waiting there in a slip lane, it gets the green a little bit before the rest of the traffic that's moving with that bus so that it can get ahead of some of the traffic. That allows it for small sections of mixed traffic to be able to keep ahead of the wave of traffic and get up to the next signal and be able to kind of move through the system a little bit more quickly. So it's not like they're fighting in full traffic. We give them an opportunity to be able to get ahead.
Any further questions? No? Okay, let's move on to the west quarter. Pardon me, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm wondering if for a place like this might be likely spot for someone to jump on to the rapid transit from some other way. Are we going to have any amenities in a place like this for drop or pickup by car or Uber, or say I want to park a bike here? What kinds of things will happen in that regard?
There's no specific drop-off facilities planned as part of these designs. Again, we're encouraging people to use our improved local service that'll be expanded to be able to have, again, higher frequency in those areas to be able to draw people into the RT corridors. And so we're not providing for those sort of opportunities. If people are doing that sort of activity today, it'd be the same idea. You can pull over to a safe area to let teenagers or whoever it is that you're dropping off near wherever their destination is. We wouldn't be providing for that through the design.
Okay, now let's, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Sullivan.
Sorry, through the chair to Councillor, you did refer to cyclists as well. There will be cycling facilities at these locations so that people can leave their bike there in a secure manner and proceed to utilize the rapid transit system. So while we may not be providing for people drop someone off by automobile, there will be cycling integration into these stations.
Then so, I mean, as the idea of first mile and last mile becomes more common, and you know, some people may not be able to walk the 750 meters or so, I guess half that, the 375 meters, they might rather be dropped off closely. Why would we not provide some place for a taxi drop off or pickup?
So I guess I'll refer to existing system today, or any other system in terms of what it looks like in the GTA. If you see a LRT or BRT, as Mrs. Ramsey indicated, you would drive to nearest safe location and drop someone off. Today, you would probably stop at that mall location in the parking lot, drop them off at a safe location, and have them walk across the roadway. To provide designated drop-off areas along these corridors requires more land. It requires, it's going to have more significant impacts in terms of the design aspects and how we have to meander around. And by providing those additional lanes, it actually makes it longer for people to walk across the roadway itself. And from an operations perspective, people dropping off at those locations and merging back into roadway itself would cause for more conflicts and increased safety issues along there.
Okay, it does look like there's room for some bays in this particular spot, but I'm happy with the answer now.
Okay, now let's go to the west corridor. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start by describing the section of Oxford between Platts Lane and Warncliffe. Our recommended design for the full leg of Oxford West is 2 center running lanes of BRT with 4 general traffic lanes, 2 in each direction. Again, we are widening the road in order to be able to maintain the existing 2 lanes of traffic that we have there. We're not taking away any lanes in this scenario. What we heard from the public was that they wanted us to, again, minimize impacts to trees and properties, including some heritage properties closer to the Warncliffe area. Questions about today's high traffic volumes and concerns for neighborhood infiltration. Again, we also had lots of questions about how left turn operation worked. Some of the reasons we recommended this design was, again, it offers the most reliable BRT service, most efficient for those winter maintenance and waste removal options. Curbside has similar impacts to property, utilities, and trees, and similar costs to the center running, but it offers a less reliable transit service. And so again, that lead us to the recommendation of center running. And again, all options had similar impacts to the number of listed and designated heritage properties, again, closer to the area of Warncliffe. So here's a cross-section for Oxford Street West, 2 center running BRT lanes. We have that 1.5 meter median running down the center, 2 lanes of general traffic in each direction, sidewalks on both sides with some room for the boulevard. As you can see, we get pretty tight through the section from Platts to Warncliffe Road, and we are impacting some properties in this area. Okay. I didn't have a rendering for that. Yep. So I'll move on to the west turnaround. In this case, this is another example about how we'll be going from mixed traffic past the last stop of the BRT. So dedicated lanes will end at Wonderland and Oxford with near side stations, I believe, on the, actually I'll double check the rendering on that. I'll see if I can. Is it possible to switch over? Okay, so if everyone can see that rendering on the screen, there's a rendering of Wonderland at Oxford. We've got far side stations with these are the last BRT stop along the west leg of the corridor. Beyond that, if you look to the west, you can see the fire hall there, and the fact that we've opened things up to allow for access to the fire hall, and then those dedicated lanes taper out and the buses enter mixed traffic to be able to continue westward to the Capulet Lane turnaround. And if we can flip back again. So in this screen, we can see that the buses are coming from the west to Capulet, and then they'll be able to use what's currently a turnaround for, I believe, the Oxford Express and a couple other routes today, to be able to turn the buses around and then head back eastward. We're looking at options to include a driver facility in this location at the end of that leg. And this is one of the areas where we've also added an additional stop because we know there's a lot of high density residential in the area that doesn't necessarily need to walk all the way to Wonderland and Oxford to get the bus. If we have a place where we're pausing the buses anyways, we can let people on there as well. So in terms of things that we heard from the public, we heard concerns over noise and air quality from the buses in this area, and we tried to respond to let them know about how our buses will again be state-of-the-art. We're looking at options to try to either be very high efficiency diesel or electric as our options. There was also, people wanted to make sure they'd be able to make easy transfers between local and rapid transit in this area. Why we recommended this design over others, it offers that ability to provide an additional rapid transit stop, which shortens the walking distance to those existing high-density residential areas. It provides for easy transfers from local service to rapid transit, and it also a simple operation for both Oxford Express and BRT service, so they're able to kind of focus that in that same area. And again, that's what many people in the area are used to today based on the Oxford Express route. This approach is consistent with the transit village description in the London plan and what we're trying to drive in terms of intensification, and it also can provide, as I mentioned, for a driver facility at end of route. So that concludes the west leg. Any questions on the west leg?
Councillor Squire.
There we go. Oh, sorry.
Through you, Madam Chair. One of the areas my ward is interested in, obviously, is given what's going to be happening with Western Road and the idea that we're going to transfer vehicular traffic off of Richmond onto Western Road, is what's going to happen at the intersection of Oxford Street and Warncliffe, and what what Warncliffe's going to look like from that intersection till it joins up on the downtown route. And maybe I missed it, but I don't see pictures of that or renderings of that particular area. So I wonder if you could help me with that.
We don't have the specific renderings of that area, but maybe Mr. Soldo, would you like to maybe expand on some of the plans for that intersection?
So the drawings for the section from Warncliffe, on Warncliffe, from Oxford to Riverside itself, which I believe is, yeah, if you can bring them up. So they were available at the public meetings. We identified what the improvements were going to be at Oxford and Warncliffe, and then what the improvements were going to be at Warncliffe and Riverside. So in this location, oops. So at this location, you see the two stations there. The westbound is north of the dedicated bus lane that's on Oxford Street itself. And then the station for the eastbound that will turn down Warncliffe is there right at the corner in purple there. So this is the section where we're looking at running mixed traffic along Warncliffe itself. It does provide for a Q-jump lane at that intersection to get the buses through a little bit quicker. But between Oxford and Riverside itself, they'll be running in mixed traffic along the existing roadways, the existing road that's as it looks today, out there today. So that's really the section I believe that you're referring to, Council.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm just wondering, because I haven't got it yet, does the traffic modeling studies that you did take into account in terms of how people transferring over to Western Road, how these changes, the mixed lane, what the impact of that would be on people's tendency to use Western Road?
That's correct. Going back to the larger traffic modeling that Mrs. Ramsey referred to, we looked at a broader area and implementing those solutions, and in particular the solution where we are widening Western Road between Oxford Street and Platts Lane that's currently underway right now. It takes into account that additional capacity. So it looks at how people would change their travel pattern based on the additional capacity here, how they would change their travel patterns based on the closure of the Western Bridge that we talked about previously, as well as some of the other improvements in the area.
And just to conclude again, that's information that's very helpful, or will be very helpful to me if I can get my hands on it.
Any further questions on this side? Councillor Helmer?
Did we explore the idea of having a station stop? It looks very tight, so I'm not sure that even would fit, but at Woodward and Oxford? I know that there's one at Warncliffe and there's one at Cherry Hill, and so this would be like very, very close together. But there's a lot of pretty significant trip generators, and there's one in particular right near Woodward, where a lot of people go there. And I wonder if there's a rationale for having a stop there, or having some adjustments, either pulling the station stops back a little bit from Warncliffe, closer towards Woodward, or I don't think you can do it at Cherry Hill, but have you looked at that?
So I'll start, and I'm sure Ms. Rams will jump in if she has any additional information. The location of the station at Warncliffe really is related to the north-south transfers. That's a very heavy route, people going up to Western and then coming back down. So that was sort of a fixed location. And through the process, we did look very much at both Woodward and the Cherry Hill station. They both had pros and cons in terms of the ridership that they would be providing service to. And in the end, because of the spacing between Woodward and Warncliffe, we felt that was too close. And then you're sort of missing the ridership that would go to Cherry Hill itself. So if you're at Woodward, you have the opportunity to walk in either direction to pick up a rapid transit station, but you also have the opportunity to utilize some of the local transit as there and be able to go to another station.
Any questions on this side? Councillor Van Holst?
Thank you. So my question is regarding or in and around the Capulet turnaround. So again, one of our big traffic problems in the city is, of course, people dropping their kids off at school. We think the kids should walk to school, but parents are dropping them off. I expect that a lot of what might happen in this area is that somebody will want to go to rapid transit, and they'll get somebody to drop them off at the route from this neighborhood. They'll drop them off someplace close. Or I guess the local route will have to get to here. So where, through the chair, how will the local route going through Oak Ridge get people to the rapid transit stop? Or is it gonna continue to travel up Riverside?
Through you, Madam Chair, the local routes already use that Capulet Lane as a turnaround, so we're already utilizing that with our 3 local routes. The intent is that a station would be there, that the local routes would then tie in with the rapid transit. Does that answer your question?
Okay, it's been a long time since I lived in Oak Ridge and took the bus, but I don't think it ever came to here, and I'm wondering if it would.
So yes, it is relatively new, but we are utilizing that Capulet loop to turn our services around now, so.
Okay, well, thank you. That'll be ideal.
Commissioner Shepherd?
I was really pleased to see some reference to driver facilities in these boards and in this decision making. I think that sometimes people forget that buses are driven by people, and people need breaks, and people need to change shifts and all that stuff. First I'd like to hear a little bit about what we would be having at a driver facility.
Certainly washrooms is the key. You know, there's any number of models that we've seen in other jurisdictions, and it's obviously going to come down to space and what we're able to fit with washrooms being the key priority. Some of the concepts that I've seen in other jurisdictions include like a small lounge area, again, depending on the length of the layover. You know, they're not usually to the point where there's a whole lot of time other than, you know, to get off, maybe take a walk and utilize the washroom.
And I just wanted to say how much I love the idea of adding basically what's an extra rapid transit stop, because we also need a driver facility, and just because we can let people on the bus, we will, and it doesn't impact the system at all. It just improves our service. So I think that's great. Thanks.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, let's move on to the East Corridor and the Couplet, please.
So moving out from the east, one of the areas that we had presented at our December workshop was the Dundas section. And this was one of the areas where we only provided one option, because we had already looked at curbside versus center running and had determined that because of major utility conflicts, particularly some hydro ductwork that is running right along the curb lane, that it really precluded our ability to implement a curbside scenario in here. So we did present designs for what the center running would look like in this area and asked for the public's feedback on that. So we really didn't have an option, but we wanted still feedback from the public. And then for the east turnaround, our recommended design in this case is to be able to expand the existing terminal on campus with Fanshawe College, and to be able to bring together the local service that's currently spread out in, I think, 3 locations on campus. So it'll be brought together in a single hub, again, to be able to create that convenience in terms of transferring from local service to the BRT system. Some of the things we heard from public and stakeholders was an importance for pedestrian safety, trying to incorporate and work with the campus for any future development in this area, and that transit service to the airport should be removed or should be remain or improved as we go forward. And that'd be something, again, as part of that annual service review, looking at options. So there's scenarios where you could extend local service from this point out to the airport, or down the road, if demand or ridership increased, you could even look at options to have every third or fourth BRT bus go and mix traffic out. And so again, we can continue to look at ways to respond to ridership in that area as it grows. Why we've recommended this design, again, bringing all of those local service and RT together in one location makes for easier transfers from local to rapid transit. Again, it reduces pedestrian crossings of Oxford Street, so we want to reduce those conflicts where we can. And then local service or local transit service to the airport, again, will be maintained going forward. So I have a couple drawings. As I mentioned, this is an example, or at least some CAD drawings of the area of where the east route comes up King Street, heads up Ontario, and then starts out eastward along Dundas Street. And we had this to present at the meetings because it demonstrates some of the changes that we're doing in this area. You can see the center running option for Dundas. You can also see the King Street scenario where buses, both eastbound and northbound in their dedicated lanes, are running on the curbside with a one-way eastbound traffic running up the center. And then we've also looked at options, and we're recommending changing the King Street and Ontario intersection into a signalized intersection and returning Ontario Street to a two-way operation, which will again improve access to this area, improve service. We're offering now a BRT stop when at Ontario Street and the other one close to Adelaide. So we're essentially bookending the old East Village and allowing people to be able to access that area from the two different directions. So, and lastly, the couplet. So again, we presented the couplet at our previous sessions, looking for feedback to refine the design. Things that we heard from the public focused around areas where we could try to maintain existing on-street parking and loading areas as much as possible. And again, we'll be looking as well to some of those connecting side streets to maybe designate some loading areas so that we can provide for that need. We did some refinements where we added loading bays, including in front of the Renaissance Tower on King Street, as well as by the City Plaza. And so there's certain areas where we've tried to work with the public and business owners in the core to be able to respond to their concerns. So I think I'll finish off with a few renderings in the downtown area. So here's a rendering looking at coming in and out of the downtown using the Queen Street Bridge. You can see our RT routes are on the curb lane we've maintained the existing 2 lanes of one-way traffic coming down the Queen Street Bridge. Those buses extend coming into downtown up and then turn down Rideout Street to head towards King Street. And here's a rendering of King Street looking east from Talbot. At the corner, you can just, at the bottom of the picture, see the roof. There's a BRT stop location at Talbot is one of those places. And we have the RT buses running in mixed traffic. One of the things that we heard from the public through our sessions was concern about the ability to make right turns in the downtown with the curb running options. And so it's difficult to allow for right turns where we have stops, which is at Talbot Street and at Wellington. But one of the things that we've incorporated and we'll be looking forward as part of our design is to, in areas, for example, Richmond and Clarence, to pull back the bus paint and allow for a shared right turn and bus lane in there. So again, it's not like there's a steady flow of buses coming through these areas. People, when they want to make a right turn, will be able to signal their intention to move right and move into those areas. So on those busy nights after a game or places like when there's a lot of people trying to get out of the corridor, we're not going to be restricting all right turns in those areas. We want to be able to provide ability for people to move around. So that's something that we responded to comments that we heard from the public. Here's a view of King Street and Wellington Street. So this is the This is essentially our hub where the two BRT routes come together. You can see that we have two stops in this location, one on the northeast corner, and then a second one tucked in underneath the tunnel on the southwest corner. And so these would be those, I described earlier, the fact that when we have these connecting routes, these would be our longer BRT stop prototypes. These would be 60-meter stops that allow, and again, on the one example here in the rendering, you can see that connection where there's a local service bus as well as a BRT bus to be able to make those cross connections between the two services, as well as between RT routes if you need to make a transition from the northeast to the southwest BRT routes. And so maybe we'll pop back to this and I'll take questions on the west corridor and then we'll wrap things up, or the downtown couplet, I guess, is what we touched on.
Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. So I know that along the east corridor, a number of places there's signalized intersections that are being added to allow for the left turns. In terms of where they were in the initial plan, have any of those intersections moved? Or like, is we're still planning to signalize the intersections that were in the drafts that people have seen before?
There are some refinements that we're working on right now that we're trying to have ready for our draft DPR we'll be presenting in April. One of those is we've been working with the school board building that's at the corner of Highbury and Dundas, again, to maybe look at utilizing a realignment of their access to see if we can help provide better access for them and maybe add a signalized intersection while we're at it to allow for additional left turns. Some other options, again, looking at this diagram here, again, we've shown Ontario Street is going to two-way direction. In some of those areas, we don't have the room to accommodate a physical left turn lane. So we will be offering the ability to, again, pull back and almost hatch that painted line to allow people that need to make that left turn lane to signal their intention, check their blind spot for a BRT bus coming through, and then be able to use that as a left turn lane. So we want to be able to provide as many opportunities to access the neighborhoods to the north and the south of Dundas Street, but while minimizing property impacts at the same time.
Okay, for the landscape features that are the sort of shadow part of the rapid transit dedicated lanes, would there be an opportunity to put some kind of, not necessarily public art, but maybe some kind of signage? For example, at Dundas and Highbury, going east into Argyle, that's sort of the entryway into Argyle. There's nothing really there to tell you that you're going into Argyle at that point. And I think that there might be an opportunity there. It's a pretty wide piece, and I'm just wondering if you're looking at that sort of piece in addition to all the green landscaping features.
Through the chair, absolutely, we're looking for any opportunity as we work through these corridors to be able to integrate it with the neighborhoods and tie the work that we're doing into the neighborhoods that we're working through. And so that's an excellent example.
And Highbury Bridge, any changes going along Highbury? It doesn't usually pop up in the renderings because there's not a huge number of properties and property owners along there. A lot of it's owned by the government, but it's obviously a ripe candidate for redevelopment, so I wonder how that's looking.
Yeah, we've looked at the Highbury Bridge structure and we're able to expand the deck so that we're able to widen the surface of the bridge to allow for maintaining 2 lanes of traffic in each direction and adding in our BRT routes. So we were able to maintain the base that also makes it so that we really aren't influencing or impacting the operations of the rail tracks that go underneath that bridge. So we've met with both the rail companies and shown them each of the areas where we have crossings.
Last question, because it's coming up a bit more in the news, I just want to clarify for everybody, the Queens Avenue couplet doesn't start, in the residential part of Queens Avenue. It just starts downtown, and that's where we're talking about buses being in that loop. One thing that I think would be helpful to communicate to people, and I don't know if we have this easily at our fingertips, but local transit is going to be using the couplet as well. And I think in your presentation you said there's not going to be that many buses, and there's going to be quite a lot of buses using that loop and being in those lanes, the rapid transit ones, and then a bunch of local service buses. So I don't know what the actual frequency is going to be, but it's going to be pretty high, and it's going to remind me a lot of Ottawa when you're downtown and there's just bus after bus after bus going through those dedicated lanes, which is going to be great, but they will be pretty busy.
Further questions on this side? Questions on this side? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. I'm pleased with a lot of the adaptations that we're looking at. I'd like to see just a little further north on this. So the north route downtown, where where we get from Clarence onto Richmond Street, is that available to us?
I don't have that particular design plate here with me at my fingertips, but the full design plates for all 24 kilometers are available on our website. So it's broken down by each leg, and you can work your way through and kind of follow the path through each of the different routes.
Okay, thank you. I am pleased, I'll just go back to another comment you made early on, is having different colored stations. That's a nice landmark. If they're all the same, you could just blow by one and forget that's your stop. So if you're not paying a lot of attention, if the ride is really relaxing and comfortable, it's easy to let that happen. So looking for some individuality there as well as uniformity. Thank you.
Any further questions on this side? No? Okay, I just had a quick question. It's something that I've seen come up on social media quite a bit, and I apologize that it's not something that's top of mind for me because I am not a cyclist, but looking at these plans, and I've noticed there's certain spots that do have multi-use lanes, but I don't see a focus on cycling, and I know that we've talked about it quite a bit at our PICs and open houses, and I'm just wondering if I could get a little detail on what we're doing with any kind of cycling plan. I thought we had a cycling plan for the city, but maybe it is going to be altered because of the couplet and all of that. So, and even if you can't give me that today, next week would be fine. If maybe Mr. Soldo has some information on that, next month will be fine as well.
So thank you. This is an item that's been in the paper, and I think it's a misunderstood item, for lack of a better word. Cycling is very important to the city. That is why we have a cycling master plan. That's why we have a cycling advisory committee. And working with the cycling advisory committee, the city developed a cycling master plan last year, which developed an entire system of cycling facilities based on the various uses. And in terms of the rapid transit corridors, our goal along all of these rapid transit corridors is to provide a multimodal approach to moving people, be it pedestrians, be it cyclists, be it by transit, or utilizing the automobile. Along the corridors, we always looked at opportunities to either provide cycling facilities, provide cycling cross links across various roadways, or if we could not provide the cycling facility, to see where on parallel roadways we would actually provide cycling facilities. If you overlay the cycling master plan with the rapid transit corridors, we actually did have a board related to that at the PICs. You see how this all interlinks. But at the end of the day, in some of these areas, you just do not have the overall cross-section to provide cycling facilities. And then it's a trade-off. Do you provide for the loading? And I'll use the example here, that's because the drawing's up at the moment. On King Street, do you provide the loading and potentially the parking at the market? Or do you provide cycling facility that goes through the entire corridor? And in these locations, our goal is to provide alternative cycling facilities along parallel corridors. Along other corridors, we've also introduced, and something we haven't highlighted, when you come to signalized intersections, our goal is to provide for pocket lanes as you approach, so it provides for safe crossing of the rapid transit corridors for cyclists as well. So where we could implement it, we have, along Wellington, we have the multi-use boulevard, along King Street, further out towards Old East Village, we have a cycling facility. So when you look at these boards, you cannot look at them in isolation. You need to look at the broader picture of how the cycling facilities across the entire city are actually integrated with this. If you just look at this particular board itself, you'll see, well, where are the cycling facilities? You need to overlay all the other cycling facilities that are in parallel corridors, and that really provides a clear direction to cyclists, how they come from one part of the city to the other.
Thank you very much. And I just had a quick comment about the Ontario Street multi-way. Thank you. People are doing it now, so let's make it an actual thing. So Janet, if you want to wrap up your report, that would be, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Squire, go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up on the cycling issue, I'm glad that the chair raised it because, of course, I'm getting a lot of questions about cycling facilities in my area because there will be no cycling path along the rapid transit routes from Oxford to University on the actual route. So will you be able to help me or provide me with some information to show where those parallel routes or other routes so I can pass that on to my constituents?
Thanks through the chair to the councillor. Most definitely, that was actually thought through as part of the cycling master plan. So I'll provide you with information within the cycling master plan, which provides the locations of the parallel routes and how that integrates into the broader cycling network.
Thank you, because I'll need that on the 19th.
So thank you for your patience as we work through all those different, I know it's a lot of information to get through. As far as next steps, we'll be compiling the feedback that we got from our most recent public engagements so that we can include that as part of our draft environmental project report, which we'll be presenting to council in April. So that report will have a summary of the recommended design as well as all the supporting information and studies that we've done, the modeling from a transit perspective or a traffic perspective, our environmental impact studies, cultural heritage, archaeology, all those studies will be there to support it, as well as a complete summary of all consultation through this phase of the EA as well. So that complete report will be brought forward in April, and it's a draft report, and we'll be bringing that forward to seek endorsement to then continue through the EA process through the next stage, which calls for additional consultation on that draft report. So we're not finished. We're really just kind of bringing forward our complete summarization of what we're recommending so that it can go on for further consultation. At the end of that, it's a formal 6-month consultation that's on a clock, and at the end of that clock, there's a 30-day opportunity for public comment, and then the Minister of the Environment makes a decision on any comments received, and that's the point where we'll be concluding our EA. And so we're looking to have that wrap up by the end of this year. And so with that, I'll close out my portion, and if there's any additional questions, we're happy to take those.
Do we have any questions for the next steps in the process? Councillor Van Holst.
Yeah, I was just, we talked about the curve on the south route, and I'm wondering if there was a picture of that. Do we have a plate of the south curve on Wellington, where that's going to be? Oh.
I don't have a rendering of that area, but this is the full plan view of the straightening of the curves. You can see at the baseline is at one end, and it continues past the curve where the Anglican and Lutheran church is, and this drawing shows you up to as far as McClary, getting close to the river.
Okay, thank you. And how close is the street going to be to people's front doors? It seems very close. I know there's similar places on Adelaide Street where things get uncomfortably close.
I'll see if I can zoom in, but just in case I can't. You can see that we've got, as I mentioned earlier, a balance in terms of property impacts, where the portion from baseline to the curve, we tend to be impacting more on the west side of the road. And you can see in those cases, some of those impacts are full impacts to properties. But we've done that to be able to balance so that on the east side of the road, we're really encroaching as little as we can into those areas, because we understand that we don't want sidewalks right on people's front doors. Many people also have to try to park a vehicle in some cases in that section between the front of their house and the sidewalk. So we're doing our best to minimize those impacts and keep them to the minimum on the side that we're not widening into. And then on the opposite end of the curve, heading more towards the river, you can see it switches over. In this area, we're impacting properties more to the east of Wellington. And again, here's that section where I mentioned grading becomes a concern. And so we're trying to, again, find that balance between grades, property impacts, and trying to provide a safer route.
Okay, thank you. So where the sidewalk goes over your house, we'll just be purchasing those properties in their entirety, and those will come down?
Through each of our different stages of the process, even back prior to the master plan stage, we've been contacting with complete packages any of those properties that indicated that one of our options might be fully impacting their home. So they received a letter that included a blow-up of their property and what our proposal looked like in relation to that, a package on how our property negotiation process works, and some information on timing of the project so they understand that we're not coming through to construct this leg tomorrow. We have lots of time to be able to have those discussions. And then through that, we also offered in every one of those packages to have a one-on-one meeting. So many people along the South Corridor have taken us up on that offer and come in to meet one-on-one with our staff as well as Realty Services staff to talk through that process. And I think, again, it's really just more about, they really want to be informed on what's happening so that they can understand and plan.
Okay, thank you. And perhaps just in conclusion, here, we're doing the expansion and taking a number of properties in order to have the 4 lanes of traffic and the 2 dedicated lanes. And in the on the north route, we're not doing that. And so what made the difference in that decision? Why here and versus there?
Well, through the work that we did to demonstrate how traffic would be changing in the future, looking at all those other parallel improvements in the north means that we had a different future state under a scenario where BRT is running along that corridor. And those improvements allowed for dispersion of traffic and to be able to carry flow in a different way. We don't have parallel things that are going to be changing how traffic flows on Wellington South. You know, this basically, it is what it is. It's going to continue to grow as our city grows and congestion will grow. So this wasn't an area where we had alternate options to be able to address growing traffic. We pretty much had to maintain the 2 lanes in this location.
Okay, so thank you. Looking at the, of course, the north route, intuitively it seems like a bit of a gridlock disaster, but the fact that Western is not going to have cars going across accessing from that route, the fact that we've widened Western Road, and the fact that we're putting an underpass under Adelaide is going to ease that up, and that's what your modeling has shown, that will be fine. We will be fine is what you're assuring us.
That combined with the fact that our design includes right turn and left turn facilities and bus bays for local bus service where it loops into Richmond. And again, so you look at today, we don't have those facilities with the exception of, I think, Grosvenor. There's no left turn lanes along Richmond. And so you have current traffic in those 2 lanes being bogged down, and many times they're operating as 1 lane as it is today. So you combine the parallel improvements with the design improvements that we're putting in place to be able to make sure the lane we are providing flows efficiently.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further questions? No? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Ramsey. That was a very detailed and beneficial report. We appreciate it. I need a mover and a seconder to accept this. Councillor Helmer, Councillor Van Holst, all in favor? Thank you. So we'll move on to consent, the second report of the Rapid Transit Implementation Working Group. I need a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Helmer, Commissioner Shepherd, all in favor? Thank you. Are there any items for discussion? Okay, and there's no deferred matters or additional business that anyone wants to bring forward? Okay. Mover and a seconder for adjournment, please. Councillor Helmer, Commissioner Southern, all in favor? Thank you very much.